So it starts by me noticing in a small auction in Delaware, United States. The name of the auction is Dutch Country Auctions. There was an issue of two stamps from Russia that I wasn't sure whether I was familiar with those stamps. It's somewhere in the back of my mind. I thought I saw them somewhere at one point or another, but I wasn't quite sure. So I called up my father, the picture of who you actually saw just now. And for those of you who don't know, my dad, a couple of years ago, published a first ever big catalog of Russian provisional stamps. And my dad knows quite a bit about Russian provisional, so I called him up and I said, Dad, what do you know about these two provisional stamps, this issue? And he said, Vitaly, never heard of it. I don't think it's a real issue. I think it's a fantasy type of an issue. It's somebody's creative work type of a thing, and just forget it. And I thought, boy, what, are you sure? It looks kind of interesting to me. And he said, not interested at all. So I went ahead and did some research on this issue, and the fruits of that research I'm going to show you now. Well, we'll start with the town of Gdov. This is a geography map. It's located on the Russian side of Russian-Estonian border. To the north there is Narva. To the south is Pskov, and Gdov is actually considered to be in the part of the Pskov region of Russia. And it's a small town. It's somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 people population-wise. And that's in today's date. I don't know what it was back in 1919. Probably a little bigger than that, but probably not by much. It's known, it's reported in literature from 14th century. So it's a pretty old town, considering that it's 1 century before Columbus was born. So America did not even exist at the time. It's a pretty old town. The story goes like this. On May 15th, 1999, independent Estonian troops, army, together with the division of the southwestern White Russian army, bombarded first and then occupied the town of Gdov. Of course, before that, the town, as all Russia, was under Bolsheviks, under Red Army, under early Soviet state, but white Russians were attacking together with the Estonians. They initially bombarded the town from a couple of ships right off of the lake, Estonian ships, and then entered the town. The Bolsheviks had to withdraw in a hurry, but as they were retreating, they picked up all the government establishments and cleaned out everything they could, including the post office. So they took their cancel marks, they took all the stamps that were remaining in the post office, and essentially left everything empty. So because of the urgent need for postal services to Estonia especially, and to the rest of the world, the Civil Administrative Committee of Gdov and district requested Thomson Printing House to issue temporary postal stamps for as they called it, for liberated territories. And this was the issue. Two stamps were printed. One was orange and another one was lime green, yellow green, whatever you want to call it. One is 30 kopecks, one was 1 ruble in denomination, and this is the size, 3.2 centimeters by 4.1 centimeters. And the text on the stamps said "Временный почтовый знак в освобожденных местностей," which is temporary postmarks of freed regions. And before releasing the stamps, there was actually an area on the stamps that was provided specifically for the rubber hand stamp. It's actually not a cancel, it's just a validative stamp saying that says stamp in the middle. You can barely make it out, but you can, especially on the different scan. And it says Общественный гражданский совет города Гдова и уезда, which is Civil Administrative Committee of Gdov and District. So the historical background is that these, a part of the historical background is that these temporary stamps used for just several days at the end of month of May of 1919 until other Russian stamps were able to be brought into town and used for these purposes. They were the old Russian stamps. And the emergency issue was destroyed. And there is no literature, or barely any literature on this issue, and it's not listed in any of the Russian catalogs, and that's why it was unknown to, it is still unknown to most collectors of Russian stamps and Russian philatelic. But the first mentioning of this issue was in 1934 in the old Rossica journal, and it was Rossica Society, Russian Philatelic Society in Yugoslavia. And the author was somebody by the name Isakov, and he was a chief Rossica representative for South America. And he lived in Paraguay and Brazil, and was writing for the Rossica journal. And right there, he mentions about these two stamps, which he actually didn't have in his possession, but he provides a brief story, a historical background, and the story of how the issue came to life and what happened to it. And he mentions in that story that there are 5 pairs in existence that are owned by a collector in Estonia. His last name, he was an engineer, and his last name was Galava. And there were 2 more stamps or 1 more issue that were in the collection of Mr. Trofimov in the Rio de Janeiro. And this is the picture of that issue from Rio de Janeiro that he provided for the journal. So having learned a little bit of this nature, I went ahead and, you know, placed a bid in the auction and eventually won this pair of stamps. And when I did, it came with a very, very interesting information together with the stamps I bought. There were a few papers that I'm gonna show you. This is, it's actually a very, very interesting provenance, but this is a letter handwritten and corrected. The English language was corrected a little bit in the red ink, but it was a proof of a letter, if you want, written in 1937 by a Rossica Society member who lived in Manchuria in China. And he wrote this to an auction house in London. And the letter, in that letter, he offers the 2 stamps from Gdov as a for an auction in England. And he said that I don't know what the price for these is, but I'd approximate 100 to 150 pounds would be a reasonable offering. And in his writings, he says, being a member of Rossica and having received above information, and he refers to the initial article from 1934 in the Rossica Journal, I immediately got in touch with different philatelic clubs, magazines, and collectors trying to find out whether some more of the provisional stamps could be found. My 2.5-year search has been unsuccessful. I therefore take liberty of stating that only 7 sets exist now, 5 sets or 10 stamps in Narva, 1 set in Rio de Janeiro that was published in the article, and 1 set in Harbin in my collection. And this is the stamp that he was offering to the auction house. Well, lo and behold, he didn't sell it in the auction house, because the next piece of information that I have that also came together with the stamps was addressed to somebody named Yefim Abramovich, and it says, this letter also came with the stamps, of course, signed by the same person, Mr. Shimanovich, who lived in Harbin. And it says, Dear Yefim Abramovich, I kindly ask you to accept the enclosed stamps and copy of the journal. This is the only thing I could possibly offer you as a token of gratitude for your assistance in purchase of the apartment. Wishing you and your family well in the upcoming years, respectfully, yours, Shimanovich. And it says December 31st of 1947. So right after the war, Mr. Shimanovich moved back to, or presumably moved back to somewhere in Soviet Union, and this Yefim Abramovich guy helped him out to get a new apartment, and as a token of gratitude, or as they call them, взятка, or as just an appreciation, whatever it may have been, Mr. Shimanovich gave this guy 2 stamps. So quite interesting history of the issue, right? I thought it was, at least. So turns out, as I was doing my research, I realized that although my dad never heard of them and never saw them, and it's not in any of the Russian catalogs, it is actually mentioned in the old, well, relatively old Estonian catalog, and you guys probably all familiar with this book. And if you're not, this is a biggest catalog of Estonian stamps. Excuse me for 1 second. This is the biggest catalog of Estonian stamps. I think it was written in 1984. It was published in 1986 by Justin Hurt. And the information in the catalog was obtained from an article or a catalog published by Estonian collector in 1930s, Isaac Weiner. And personal communication with Hurt, he mentioned that Ajasti found this information and just published it. They didn't do any research of their own. Nevertheless, they do mention it in the article, and as opposed to other items listed in the catalog, there is no price provided for Gdov issue. It just being mentioned in the catalog as a somewhat mysterious issue, has never been fully explained in detail, and this type of stuff. But the picture is clearly there, and it's a little different picture from the Gdov article in 1934 journal. And the last piece of information on this issue was in British Journal of Russian Philatelic in 1980s, written by a British collector of Russian stamps who lived just outside of London. His name is Stephen Hornby. He since had passed away. But he doesn't write as much about the stamps themselves. He writes mostly about the historical background surrounding this issue. So, but very interesting, very fascinating historical background. If you're ever interested about, you know, White Russian movement and all the politics surrounding the area, and Estonian troops and Russian troops, and how places changed hands from one side to another. Very, very interesting political article. So, so this is all that we know up to this point about the Gdov issue. There is one picture of the issue from the original 1934 Rosik article that was at the time somewhere in Rio de Janeiro. There is a picture from the Estonian catalog, which is of a different stamp. And this is, of course, the color image of the stamps that I purchased. And once a friend of mine, once he found out that that I just purchased this issue, he sent me, he took a picture of the stamps and reprinted them on similar color paper and sent it to me. And one of the pictures, he actually created a cancel mark. And so these are kind of souvenirs for me And he said, "Oh, you made these up. These are really easy to come across." And he said he mailed me these copies. And of course, literally a month after the auction took place on eBay, you could find these stamps. And the seller from Spain was selling them for 27 euros plus 5.80 for shipping and handling. He does mention that it's a copy of the stamp in the description of his lot, but anyone could own these. I think it was just an interesting business scheme that he had. Nevertheless, this is the issue, and this is my brief talk, and this is one of my favorite lines. Philately starts where the catalog ends. That's it. And just by the way, where do you think these stamps are now? It's in my dad's collection, because once I did all this research and once I published about it, he said, "Oh my God, Vitaly, I won them." So he's working on writing a new catalog, which is going to be actually a 2-volume catalog, and I think he's probably going to include this issue in it. But he has it now. Of course, I gave him a hard time for sure. That's
excellent,
it.
Vitaly. Thank you so much. Thank you for interesting presentation. Personally, I enjoyed it. It also shows that, you know, despite the huge community of philatelists, especially related to larger countries like Russia, that these discoveries are still possible, which is really, really, really interesting.
That's the fun of it.
Exactly. And I like this expression that, you know, fun starts where the catalog ends. So yeah, absolutely. Any questions? Yeah, exactly. Just, you know, jump in. Questions, comments. Yeah, there is a fellow, I don't remember his current eBay handle. There is one fellow in Spain that keeps pushing a lot of forgeries, especially of Lithuanian stamps, and I'm not going to be surprised if that's the guy just changes the, you know, eBay name.
Well, I'm pleased to see that you gave them to your father with Father's Day in the States tomorrow. So it's very nice of you.
That's right.
Was it the barter? Kind of, you bartered something to him, or?
Well, not, you know, we don't have an exact barter. He helps me out with my collecting interest because he has more free time on his hands. So he sometimes does research and sends me links to something that he finds and stuff like that. But, you know, I have a decent collection of Russian stamps, but provisional issue is really his topic. And the true thing is as anything in philately, if you know, we have something that we know is of interest to somebody else, and you don't have that much of an interest in that particular subject, you can always find ways to do a philatelic exchange of some sort. So, you know.
I'll remind you that, Vitaly, when I start looking for more additional Rasseni covers.
I knew you'd say that. I have a pretty decent collection of Rasseni. It's not as good as yours, but I do.
All right. Any other thoughts? What do you in general think? You know, adding kind of, as we move on, it's going to be more and more difficult to, you know, keep focusing on Lithuania only. It's, you know, small country, and then so on. So what do you think in general, having a possibility to invite others to give us talks on, you know, any other topics related to philately? What's your feeling in general? Ką jūs iš principo galvojate apie panašius filatelinius pranešimus su Lietuva nieko bendro neturinčius? Okay, I see people nodding. Giedrius is nodding. Very good. Žilvinas is nodding. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's definitely good. Yeah, I know that's definitely, you know, one could broaden understanding and see kind of common issues, not the same issues, but the common topics from different angles, even if it's just a different country or different region. And I think the next topic will kind of highlight that even more. Of course, we focus on Lithuanian philately, and we've been studying that for many years. I cannot talk about personally myself, but like Antanas and a few others. However, there's tons of very useful information done by other societies that perhaps we can learn something and use for our Lithuanian philately needs in some sense. Let me, George, how do you want to proceed? I have your slides loaded up, or you could load from your computer and just use your own pace to move along. How do you want to proceed? So basically, let me show you just the one introduction slide. So the next topic of our topic today is the discussion about what the society should do in the future regarding postal history. When first I heard, I was like, okay, we're probably talking about modern philately and modern period and so on. But George kind of pointed out that this could be easily applicable also to so-called classical period, 1918 to 1940. So again, special thanks to George, and I have his slides. But George, if you would like to, start screen sharing from your computer and take over here, that would be absolutely terrific. You need to switch on your mic. George, switch on your mic. I muted earlier. Still, you. Okay.
Here we go. Am I back?
Yep.
I would appreciate it if you could run the computer. You're much
Okay,
better
sure,
at
absolutely.
it than I am.
Absolutely, that's
So,
that's no problem at all. And just let me know when you want to switch it to next
Will
slide.
do. I haven't introduced myself to this group, so let me start with that. George Shaw, I live in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and I collect all of Eastern Europe stamps and postal history. And I collect both traditional periods like between the war and 19th century, as well as the modern period. And so I was fascinated by last month's discussion and raised a couple of questions on postal history. And so I worked with our president to come up with this. So with that as an introduction, let's go to the next slide. And so this is really from my perspective. Number one is Lithuanian postal history in the period between the wars is a difficult area, since I collect all of Eastern Europe, all the way from Yugoslavia and Albania up through the Baltic states and places in between. I would have to say Lithuania for the between the war period is the second most difficult to find. The only one more difficult is Albania. Places like Bulgaria, for example, are much easier to find and to begin to analyze. So I said, what can I discover in terms of websites, reference volumes, and so on about the postal history of Lithuania in this period? And I was very pleased to see a lot on the Society website. And I know there's a lot of content from the corresponding European societies, I think particularly out of Lithuania and Germany, but I don't have access to those. Secondly, the catalog that we went through with the author last time has great sections on rates, town listings, and maps for very specialized periods. And I also have the major volume on the post in Lithuania between the wars, which I believe I received from an old-time correspondent, Mr. Viner, who I know through exchanges with the Rasika Society. And then finally, the list of cancels by towns has a lot of information that's useful for postal history. But what I couldn't find was a common source that pulls all this kind of information into a single reference volume, including pricing on cover by rate period and or issue. And so the discussion topic, after I go through a couple of more charts, will be, as our president said, what should the Lithuanian Philatelic Society do in the future regarding postal history? And so the next couple of charts are really prompts for that discussion. So if we can go to the next one. And this is arranged topically, and then I give examples by country. Several of the general stamp catalogs of individual countries list prices on cover, single, multiple, and mixed franking. Here are some of the examples. Some of them also have specialized stamp catalogs with very detailed listings on cover and explanations of what was important about that time period or parts of usage, including focuses on the changes in the boundaries of the countries, inflation, airmail, and so on. You can see some examples there. In more detail are specialized monographs, particularly the Czechs, the Hungarians, the Poles, and the Yugoslavs. Some of them span 4,000 pages in multiple volumes, and they cover the stamps and their usage, but often give extended sections on postal history. And then finally, stamp catalogs with content on postal history, specialized single volumes on a particular issue or time frame. And I would say in my library, which runs a couple of thousand reference works on Eastern Europe, most of the Eastern European countries have specific things like this. So any comments on this chart before I go to the next one? So there you go.
All right, shall we just move?
Okay, next chart.
Mhm.
So then if you go from stamp catalogs to postal history reference works, there are several categories which I've listed here. I know there are many more categories, but these are the ones I summarized. One is enablers, rate tables, list of town names, maps showing changes over time. Again, most Eastern European countries have things that list these either in part or comprehensively. The second is handbooks on cancels. The Tensor series on the Austro-Hungarian Empire runs about 7 volumes. They list it by town, by period of historical use. Similar things for the Czechoslovak provisional cancels in 45 and 46, as well as several countries' governments in exile, very detailed handbooks. Then volumes on special topics, censorship, traveling post offices, military, again, airmails for many countries. And then almost all countries have a lot of articles in their journals or on websites. Most of those tend to focus, as I saw with the Lithuanian Society, on individual covers and specific issues, not comprehensive coverage. Then digital collections and exhibits. And I'm finding an increasing number of societies focused on Eastern Europe or expanding digital coverage. And then 2 important handbooks about the postal system. In addition to the one that I mentioned for Lithuania, there's a fascinating one for Mongolia up to 1941, the classical period for them. And so the stamps and covers are interwoven in terms of a more general description of the postal system. And then lastly, I'm listing 2 projects that I've worked on over the years in an attempt to inventory known covers by the specialists. The big one I've worked on, because it's my #1 specialty, is the first few years of the Soviet Union and the frequency of covers by rate period, domestic, international, specific characteristics, and so on. I have about 4,000 covers from this time period. And then a recent one 2 years ago with the Indo-Chinese Society was focusing on North Vietnam prior to 1959, an extremely difficult period. The 6 collectors who specialized in that together had about 300 covers. Most of mine were philatelic. Most everybody else's were far more interesting than what I had. So anyway, these are some of the ways that Eastern European societies have tried to cover postal history. So any questions or comments on this chart? Let's go to the next chart. The best catalog for postal history in terms of being comprehensive and detailed is Mercure out for the Czechoslovakia 1918 to 1939. And I'm working on a project to take that catalog, which may be about 10 years old, and to work up an English translation. I don't speak Czech. One of the members of the society, Lucia Svoboda, is the language expert and has a fantastic collection of postal history of this period as well. So I've got a couple of screenshots that I have converted to Excel to show what this catalog is doing to show details. So let me cover this in a little more detail. And they break out letters, registered letters, express letters, and then very specialized things like parcel post, money orders, money letters, and so on by different rate periods, and showing mixed single franking, as well as multiple franking. The issue in question is one of the more difficult for between the war Czechoslovakia. 2 stamps showing an ancient Hussite warrior. The stamps were issued in 1920 and were valid for a very short period of time. The currency shown is Czech crowns, roughly 20 to $1. So if it shows 500 crowns, that's about $20 US for a single franking registered letter. So what this does is it shows kind of like the details of how to break out coverage of postal history in a way that allows you to take the covers you have and see the relative scarcity. And some of them get quite pricey. In the lower right corner, 2,500 crowns is $125. So let's go to the next chart. And it gets more detailed. Postcards, parcel cards here. Parcel cards get enormously complicated because the rate is determined by essentially the weight and the value of the contents. And so those become very scarce in many cases. And so this is the level of detail that's in the Mercure catalog, the best I have found for Eastern Europe for studying postal history. Next chart. And here are money orders, money letters, and then additional kinds of fees. Money order is when you tell them you want to send an amount of money and they charge you a fee. Money letter is when the currency and the coins are included in the letter. And many of these are enormously scarce. And so this is the 1920, 1921 period. The final thing I pulled down is a different cut that I'm working on for the Czechoslovakia Society. So if you can go to the 4th chart on this issue, is for the more general collector, this is the basic material. And So it gives the denomination of the stamp, the rate period, the validity of the period, how long the period was, and you can see 2 months, 9 months was a long period of validity, what the characteristics of the period were, domestic, international, letter, postcard, etc., type of usage, and then value both in crowns from the Czech Republic and value in US dollars. This I'm developing not just for this issue, but for the Czechoslovakia Society for the entire 1918 to 1939 period. When it's done, it will probably run about 5,000 lines of detail. And so because the catalog's in 3 volumes totaling about 600 pages. So this is an example of what I'm doing for another Eastern European society to make postal history more understandable, both for the beginning and intermediate collectors, so they can identify what they have, but also on the prior charts for the advanced collectors, where the level of detail you need to be able to really understand what's going on is only in the local language, not currently in English. I've got 3 or 4 similar postal history projects underway with other Eastern European societies, the Russians, the Hungarians, and I'm working one on East Germany that really is to determine the relative scarcity of postally used material and on-cover material in the United States. It's a different cut than what Michal shows in their German specialized catalog. So anyway, this is the kind of assessment in terms of, with Mercure, really the most advanced catalog for Eastern Europe for postal history. So questions, feedback, what do you think of the approach? And then the final chart will be a general discussion on where the Lithuanian Society may want to go in the future.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, George. First of all, thank you for putting this presentation together and showing us excellent examples of what others are doing and perhaps where we need to be going in the future. Personally, if I may just kind of quickly jump in, and then, if you don't mind, I'll go back since I have a control of the computer. Yes, so yeah, so what, it's obviously not a single person job to do that, although you mentioned you have a lot of experience and apparently time on your hands to work with so many different societies. I think we could easily look at this task and split in smaller kind of sections and see if anyone would be interested in teaming up and kind of analyzing. I think some of the things mentioned here, for example, inventory of known covers, it is something we've been talking about. We've been talking in the context of either local issues. So we attempted to collect, and Vitaly was involved in Telshey 1920 issue covers, basically to have a register. We call it register. Basically, it is a list of all known covers that either accessible on the website or perhaps there is a list. Similar things, especially those small local issues like Raseini. Again, it's probably there are very few covers, so it's basically one-day job to do an inventory and have it listed somewhere accessible to others. but we started doing something similar with triangular stamps on Darius and Girena's covers. If you read our LPS journals, it started several years ago so we have kind of tracking. So we definitely understand the importance of some of that, and I think that will be very easy to to move forward and add provisional covers. And again, and it's the reason it's easy to do because there are very few of them. Of course, the major task will be related to regular issues, and then kind of splitting them and documenting and so on. So that was just a kind of one comment I wanted to mention. It kind of definitely resonated with me, and I'm pretty sure that more people, and the ones especially like perhaps Antanas Inkauskas, who's being involved in compiling that catalog, he could give his kind of honest opinion whether we have manpower and the bandwidth to do these kind of things. But obviously, it's a discussion. So I'm going back to the last. If somebody wants to direct me to any specific page for to show something or ask, I'll be happy to do that. Let me go back to your summary where you left. Oops, where you left off. Okay.
Well, I'll add my 2 cents. I'm kind of a beginner in this, and it seems quite complicated to me, and requires a great deal of knowledge and sophistication in terms of doing something like this. So I think for your kind of members that are beginners, I think it's beyond them, to be perfectly honest. Frankly, I haven't been able to get through all the content on the website at this point. So that's kind of my initial reaction.
Well, George, I can tell you that the postal rates and franking on covers is at times a pain of my existence as an expertiser. Because there are covers that are perfectly legitimate and yet are over-franked for a mysterious reason. And you say to yourself, why is that? And you're trying to come up with the reason, and is it just over-franked, or is there something else that was added, or there is no known to me rates for, say, valued covers. If there is, extra postage on the stamp because it was a valued cover, how much of it and for what value, how much should be added, and things of that nature. It's a very complex subject. You may know the usual rates, and you may know what should be on the cover, but when it's not the exact rate, you try to come up with the idea of why is that, and and then of course when you're certifying a cover as an expertiser, you have to say, I don't know why, which does not sound all too professional, and or you say, is it a legit cover to begin with? Maybe just somebody put a bunch of stamps and used an all cancel to, they don't know the rates, but I'm supposed to, and yet this doesn't make sense in terms of the rates, and is it a legit cover? So that information would be extremely valuable, but it's also, as you said, Lithuanian covers as opposed to Soviet Union covers or Latvian covers are very hard to come by.
Right.
Especially, an interesting covers, not your run-of-the-mill from Condas to Telshai or something like that, or vice versa. So, boy, it would be extremely, extremely helpful, but it's a big undertaking.
Is there a way you can focus on particular parts of it? And I like the idea of the provisional issues. Maybe say with the Czech Society, the piece everybody wants is the information on the first issue, the castle issue, the Hrodkiny, because that's where most of the collectors have interest. Are there issues in Lithuania like that that would be of the greatest interest rather than trying to do everything?
Well, I think that the most interest would be the earliest issues as well. The first and second Vilnius issues and the Kaunas issues. Clearly, those covers are of utmost interest to a lot of collectors. They're valuable. And there's enough of them where you can study the rates and things of that nature. So I think that could be done, and that could be a good start. But when we're talking about 1930s, boy, that's a tough area. And that's where express covers come in, with their rates, and it just, there is enough literature written about. Well, not enough. There is some literature written about that, say, transatlantic clipper, or there is, and what the rate should be for that, which is a different rate. There is literature for airmail, rates and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a tough subject.
I second what Vitaly said. I think we should, set a reasonable goal, either, as I said, Vilnius and Kaunas issues, and maybe local issues and provisional covers, because we can really do that relatively quickly, but within a reasonable amount of manpower available, without kind of losing an interest. If if the study takes 10 years, you will definitely will lose interest. But if you set a short-term goals, and if we split the effort, actually, yeah. So the first, to your question, should it be a study group? Absolutely, yes. And we need to revisit this kind of discussions on the regular. Sorry, I just let someone into the meeting. Regularly to discuss. It's easier to do, of course, than 20 years ago because of the internet, and of course we have digital scans. Even if we don't know who the owner is, at least we have access to relatively good quality scans, which is again easier to work than just basically on some descriptions or black and white copies from some old articles and catalogs. So I think I definitely see way forward. As far as if you're going down the list, we could set the goal to have some kind of a summary of each of the topics in the form of articles, which would be excellent for the LPS journals. And eventually, once that material is compiled, we can definitely think about publishing a catalog. And as far as the LPS is concerned, we can definitely sponsor printing cost. And have that kind of investment in this effort, because as you mentioned, experts and the specialists probably have sufficient information to navigate through the complexity of the postal history. But if we want to attract new people, if we want to expand the knowledge, that information is absolutely necessary.
Would it be possible to pull together a bibliography?
Yes.
Put it on the website.
In short, answer is yes. The Jan Kaptein in the Netherlands, and he was on our meeting few months ago. He has, I would say, quite good. I can't say complete bibliography, but I think it is partially searchable. At least it's in the form of HTML that one can, scrape the page and do somewhat, local computer support for the articles. So that is definitely available. We can do kind of an inventory and kind of review that bibliography. Again, we have LPS journals. We can kind of go through one more time just to make sure that everything is listed in that. We have New York LPS Society archive. Again, we can go through some of them in Lithuanian, some of them in English. So you need somebody who's bilingual to go through. And I think yes, the bibliography. My goal to have a bibliography searchable. That has to be online, it has to be easily accessible, easily searchable, and then perhaps that needs to be kind of looked into. There are a few people in Lithuania now, and then George, Richard Vainora specifically, who is quite good at keeping track of articles and all publications related to different periods, start from classical period and so on. Even if he doesn't speak maybe English, we could somehow engage him to give us, feedback and his kind of contribution to this would be definitely very useful.
Another suggestion, and I'm thinking of John's comment, starting out in terms of the basic understanding of postal history, is to put rate tables in English as well as Lithuanian on the website.
Yes, I completely agree. I hesitated as a webmaster. I kind of hesitated doing that because there are a couple of links in the philatelic directory there leading to other people's work. But I think you're right. It needs to be in one place rather than going there, and if the other website is down, in that case the information is not accessible. Yes, rate tables, absolutely. And we're talking about Lithuania, but I kind of automatically think of Klaipėda Memel as well, Central Lithuania as well in the same context. George, can you give us kind of an example? How do you work? How do you communicate, and how do you work with other members of, let's say, a study group? Just by email? You have like a Zoom meetings, or what's the best effective way to work on, let's say, any specific topic?
Zoom.
Email and Zoom. Okay.
One that has really made a lot of progress is a study group of the Czech Society on Perfins.
Okay.
And in a year, they have done amazing things.
Where do you keep, let's say, if you're going through, let's say, Perfins, just an example.
Yeah.
Do you have like a repository of scans? Or like everybody has a copy of let's say those scans on their computer, and when you talk to you just
right.
you know exactly what you're talking about. What's the best, what's the easiest way for moving along that requires, let's say, illustrations?
What we've done with the Czech Perfin was there have been about 6 different handbooks over the years. We've decided which one to focus on. There's a lot of information in Czech, but really nothing in English. There's a new Perfin handbook coming out of Prague, hopefully later this year. And we've decided recently to do an inventory of what's in the members' collections by Perfin type and by issue. And then review what an appropriate system of valuation would be, and agree among the 8 of us a consensus on what's a fair basis of valuation.
Okay.
And
Okay,
they're
yes.
focusing on a single issue, the first issue of the Czech Republic. And then over time, it's likely to expand into the 1920s and the 1930s.
Okay. All right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyone else would like to comment? Antanai, ar turit kokių nors komentarų, pasiūlymų? Antanas, would you like to join the discussion?
Well, if you would like to do something, you have to have, how to say, a group of people who are interested on that.
Mhm.
Because if you are doing something, say, in which there are no, how to say, users or how to say, interesting people in that information, it's very difficult. You will how to say, waste a lot of time, efforts, and so on. And if the results will be useful for, say, for 5 or 10 people. So if you are working with something general, where, how to say, interesting people are hundreds, it's much easier. But now we are at a specific moment for Lithuania. When I made presentation about handbooks and not handbooks, about catalogs for Lithuanian Philatelic, I mentioned that what is missing here, exactly what George said. We have no catalog for entire issues for letters, for franking, say, material we have, but not system to say, well, at the very beginning in 1919, there was no official, how to say, rates. They came only later, something in March or April. But say our colleague, Mr. Daniela, he was making, how to say, or restoring the postage rates, looking at their letters, because the missing some official information, what kind of official postal rates were at particular time. Another thing is very interesting, but for me, for example, I tried to find, how to say, postal rates or airmail rates to different countries. Asked Daniela, what were? He said, oh, it's terrible, because to specific country there was specific rates. So the list of how to say, postal rates will be very huge. Let's say, let's show only a few examples what were in general airmail plus 30 or 60 cents, and that's enough. So if you would like to do something, it's for us, like affiliates, will be very nice, but it's very difficult. So I would like who will younger people, if they will be, how to say, able to how to say, to put their efforts to do something, it will be very nice. That's in shortly.
Thank you, Antanas. Yes, that's definitely good comment in terms of raising a, you know, yeah, but the first question is, if we all answer and we decide that, yes, this is the very important topic and this is an important field for us to advance, you know, that's already a big achievement, because, you know, until George started openly discussing, you know, we kind of knew it, we kind of understood, and everybody relied on their own different sources. But if we say, yes, this is an important, so as a society, we can make a commitment, and I can easily talk on behalf of society, saying that I definitely see a need for such a studies, because it definitely advances Lithuanian philately, but also gives a hand to new people, especially that want to join this particular field of study. So second question is, can we start preliminary forming a formal study group. It doesn't have to be finalized. It doesn't have to be kind of like limited. And then, we'll go from there. We'll have, 1 or 2 meetings and we can have a further discussions. And then, okay, we'll split our work and we'll go from there. If we only talk and we don't do anything else, nothing will happen. But if we, make a small commitment of personal time and resources, I think this could easily happen. It will not happen overnight, obviously, but at least it's a very, very useful discussion. I wish few other people join. Vygintas Bubnys would be very useful to have aboard. He apologized, as I mentioned earlier, that maybe he will join us later if he still has some time. We could, keep talking about forming a study group and keep looking for more people to join as we, progress through the other Zoom meetings next month and next month and next month. Basically saying, okay, this is one of the goals. Oh, I see Richard has joined us. Labas, Richardai, Malono. Anyway, so that's kind of my discussion. If anybody wants to comment, go ahead.
Well, I'd be happy to join the study group. I don't think I'll be able to provide a lot of time, but I can provide some of the little knowledge that I have and some of the scans of some more interesting covers that I have. I do have covers to different destinations, just like what Antana said, to different countries, airmail covers, and they do show different rates. So we could potentially set up a library of scans type of a thing that the rates catalog would be based on. But I don't know if I can spend time to do a lot of research on it.
No, but Vitaly, that's a good start.
Analyzes all the information and puts it together.
Very good. That's a good start to promise to share your scans and contribute as much as you can. I think that's already a step forward. So we could define kind of temporary goals. We can say we want to have inventory of provisionals, local issues covers. Maybe, as we discussed, first Vilnius covers, and I don't know, airmail to kind of more different countries. I don't know if we can say airmail in general, and then we can go there. Or and that's a good temporary goal to start with. It will give us some kind of impetus to start going through collections and compiling a tables, and then maybe we could use these Zoom meetings every month, just make a short brief update. Hey, this is what we've done. This is what we compiled. We're missing these and these and these covers or something as a kind of reminder. And there will be a kind of continuing topic evolving as we move through the, for the Zooms meetings in the year. That's my suggestion.
The other thing that is probably a good idea to set up is a common file where people from different places can put their information into, such as a Dropbox file or a Google file or whatever that may be, where I can scan covers and just throw them into that common file, and it may have subcategories in it of Telshai provisionals or Rajinai stamps or Vilnius covers or foreign destinations airmail.
Vitaly, yes, that's yes, absolutely. That's a good suggestion, and we'll do that. I will do that specifically. I will set up a Dropbox, several categories initially, and to collect at least in one place some of the scans. They don't have to be super high resolution. It can be just for the reference, and I'll kind of suggest maybe kind of file naming system, because if you just copy files from the internet, very often it's like 10738 and you have no idea what it is if you go through a text. So we need some kind of a file classification system as well, unless it goes through a database. which in that case, I'll work on the technicalities, how to make it easily and smooth for uploading and sharing with others.
Or you can do a general folder where you are actually in charge of renaming files and sorting them out into subfolders.
Yeah, that's one option. Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
If I could divert slightly from the topic, as far as our Zoom programs are concerned, I believe it would be very interesting to hear something about the June overprints, which happened in June of 1941, when the Germans pushed the Russians back, and many Lithuanian towns have overprinted the Russian stamps, stating that this is a free Lithuania, free Telšiai, and free Rokiškis, Raseiniai, and so forth. Now, the person that's very familiar with them is obviously Antanas Jankauskas, and also Vitaly. And Vitaly has done some research on the scarce issues like Anykščiai and Pajūrys. And I would say the topic would be interesting for discussion here. Many of us, I would say most of the people that collect Lithuania are also collecting the June, so-called June overprints. So I just wanted to mention that this could be a topic for one of our Zoom discussions in the future.
Well, you touch on a very complex subject, John. It would sound like that would span multiple meetings, because it's not a 15 or 30-minute discussion. You can do a town of Telšiai in one meeting, and or in a couple of meetings. And then I guess Pajūrys and Anykščiai can do one meeting, and things of that nature. It's extensive topic. Or you can just do a general overview, not getting into details at all. But
yeah, something like like an introduction to June overprints for somebody who has little information.
Yeah, I can do that. That's easy. The one difficult subject that I had discussed with Vytautas Daniela at one point is getting an article written about the overprints as they occurred, and putting it together with the movement of German forces and occupation of the towns. And this town gets occupied first, this issue gets issued, and then the other. And he said that it was done as independent towns, but it had never been done, as the whole Lithuania was getting occupied, and putting that together as one complete article. And that's, I think, what you're talking about, John, as
Yes.
As issues started popping up here and there.
Yes.
That an interesting subject that would take up a lot of time in terms of historical research, not necessarily stamp research, because you know the overprints, you know the stamps, you know the issue date, but as historical background to the German forces, moving into the area.
Right.
No, I was going to say that, mention not so much research in the area as much as presentation of actually what happened, which towns were overprinted, how successful they were. And I know in conversation with you, Vitaly, you mentioned that some of the cancels have been brought uh, to the United States or maybe to Germany, and used counterfeiting some of these stamps, and that happened especially in Algeria, I believe. And you were able to determine which are real and which are counterfeits by studying the ink in them.
Unfortunately, that's the reason why a lot of Lithuanian collectors don't collect the Junova prints, because there are just too many forgeries. The overprints, the stamps, especially the covers are extremely expensive, and you certainly would not buy something where it could easily be a forgery. There are more forgeries of these issues than there are real stamps and real overprints for some. And that's why most or a lot of Lithuanian collectors or collectors from other regions shy away from collecting that area of philately, just because you have to have spent a lot of time researching it to have enough knowledge to what's real and what's not, or have everything expertized. And then, of course, when it comes to expertization, as the time moves on and we learn more and more, I can show you numerous expertizer certificates on the forged stamps, which at the time they believed were legit, and in reality turns out that now we know that they're not, that they're actually well-made forgeries, type of thing. So yeah, and that's why I'm saying it's a very complex area of Lithuanian philately. I'll be happy to give presentation kind of overall for like one of the meetings for half an hour or 45 minutes on different issues and all, but not getting into much detail on that subject.
No, I didn't think that just a general presentation that I would say would be beneficial. I don't know how you think about that, but
No, absolutely. I'm open to any topic, and variety of the topics makes it very good. I just feel bad for Vitaly because he's making presentations every second Zoom meeting. But I understand that he has good knowledge and is an excellent presenter in that sense. That would be really good if you could do some kind of not going into too many with a couple of good examples, but basically mentioning the overall situation with these June overprints.
okay.
I'll do it maybe September or something like that.
Okay, I'm writing it down.
It's nice to hear voices from volunteers. And there's you, Vitaly.
You volunteered me, John.
We'll try to get more people joining us and giving us different topics, Vitaly. So eventually, you will be just, sitting, relaxing like this and enjoying.
But not very soon yet. Hopefully. You can make many interesting talks and presentations because he's very much into stamp collecting in the Lithuanian stamp, and also understand that you collect Latvia and possibly Estonia.
Yeah, and I dabble in Russia, as you can tell a little bit.
Okay.
Now, George, you may be actually very interesting because Soviet Union, you said, is part of your interest, and I'm sure you would be interested in that whole provisional issue area. I don't know if you have come across my dad's catalog.
Not aware of it. I saw you've been corresponding with Steve Volis. I know him well. So
Well, it's
Would you be willing to share your presentation with Steve?
Steve
for the
knows
Rossica
about this
Society?
issue because I published an article in Rossica on that Gdov
Okay,
issue.
all right,
He's well aware of it.
okay.
But
And also,
since you asked about literature and bibliography, I think my dad's catalog is something that you'd be extremely interested because there's not a lot of literature at all
Yeah.
on the Soviet Union provisionals from 1919 to early 20s with all the rate changes and all the handwritten overprints and provisional upgrades to the stamps and things of that nature by towns.
Yes. I've exhibited internationally the hyperinflation, but stayed away from the provisionals.
Everybody does. It's such a tough area. Well, I don't know what to tell you about the catalog because there was one printing and it's all sold out. As I said, my dad is working on the other edition, but it'll be a little bit. It's going to be much more comprehensive, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about
Okay,
this
good.
derail into the not so much like Soviet Union area. Antanas, I'm sorry. You wanted to say something. Audrius.
oh, no, no problem at all. I mean, we're kind of wrapping up, so it's a kind of open topic. Any topic is fine. Absolutely. If anyone wants to say something, discuss something.
Do we have a show and tell on the agenda?
Yes, that would be a good time to start now. Anyone has any new interesting acquisitions?
I think that is probably my favorite area of Zoom meetings when I go to Zooms of different philatelic clubs and societies. If they have show and tell, it's always fun to see something that somebody just recently acquired and all. So can I share a screen?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
So I just came up with this. Can you guys see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
The airmail covers out of Lithuania are very uncommon and they're hard to come by. But most Lithuanian collectors collect those airmail covers, especially first flights. However, these are very interesting because they are first flights, but they're not out of Lithuania, they're into Lithuania.
Into Lithuania, yeah.
And I thought that is quite interesting and unusual because here are the two covers. And I don't know how to share two screens, but let me
Just
try
a flip
to
page, just, at the bottom, just go to the
Yeah.
next page and you will see it.
Whoa.
Whatever you see on your screen should come up here. Yeah, click that right arrow down there.
right there.
Down there, you see kind of two advanced photos, kind of left and right. So, yep.
Oh,
Click.
here is another one. So that's the reverse side of that of the covers that you just saw. So, oops. So this is one of the covers on the top is first flight to Kaunas from Amsterdam. And the one on the bottom is the first flight from Moscow to Kaunas.
What are the dates? Vitaly, what are the dates? I don't
That's
see.
exactly what I'm getting into.
Oh.
So this is 30th of April of 1923. I'm sorry, it's 30th of April of 1930.
30.
That's where there was a connection between Germany and Moscow, which before that flew through, I believe, either Riga or Klaipėda. But this was the first line established through Kaunas. And that was the first flight from Moscow to Kaunas on essentially it's postmarked as 23 in the evening on April 30th. And if you look at the back of the cover, it is received in Kaunas on May 1st of 1930. And then it flew back to Moscow on May 1st. But the cover from Amsterdam to Kaunas is May 2nd. And that's the first flight as well of the same year. It's stamped in Berlin it went from Amsterdam to Berlin on May 1st and got into Kaunas on May 2nd.
Hmm.
So it's the first flight to Kaunas and from both directions, from Berlin as well as, so this cover on the top from Amsterdam went through Berlin. So the flight was actually from Berlin to Kaunas and from Moscow to Kaunas. And I think these are kind of, it's on the same day on the May 1st. And I think it was just a cool compilation of first day airmail covers to Kaunas when the connection, airmail connection, postal connection had been established. I've had the one from Amsterdam for a little while now, but I recently purchased the one from Moscow. So I thought it's a kind of a cool acquisition and worth sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, that's good.
I apologize. I have to run. I have to go to another meeting.
All right, John, see you next time.
So I'll see you at the next Zoom meeting.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
All right, anyone else wants to share anything? Say anything? Kas nori pakalbėt, parodyt ką nors? Stefano, you need to switch on your...
Just one question. There is, I'm not so particularly enthusiastic about postal history, but from the historical point of view, I'm interested in the Soviet Civil War, isn't it? So, and I noticed that there has been a lot of postal involvement, post office and access to the armies, which were marching up and down. Is there any plan of having these as a topic for the future? Can anything think about this? You know about stamps issued by Bermont Avalov, by Denikin. I also noticed that Latvia had some recent issues, I believe last year, about Bermont Avalov in the centenary of the army. But I'm totally unaware. These are just names I know, but I know nothing about the history.
So I can chime in a little bit on that. I'm certainly not an expert, but there is a lot of literature written about Bermontavalov and his Western Army issues. There were three different issues issued by his army. If you're interested, I can send you some scans of the issues. I don't know what exactly you're interested in. If it's more of a historical background, there are articles written about it that you can read. It did not involve, I can hear you, Stefano. I know you're saying something.
Yeah, sorry. No, I don't. For example, was there involvement of Bermontavalov in the village of Estonia or Russia near Estonia? Because you mentioned white armies. Perhaps I'm just making confusion, but was that sort of environment where this happened, or was it a bit later? or was
Well,
it in a different area, for example?
I don't think there was a lot of that in Lithuania, but they were very much present in Latvia, and that's where Bermontavalov issued his stamps, predominantly in Latvia in Mitava. There was a guy. It was Bermontavalov's corps, the army, but the guy who was in charge of issuing a lot of these stamps was a guy named, oh my goodness. It is Leo. I forget the name right now, but there are quite a few issues. There are 3 different issues from there. The only maybe somewhat related to Lithuania area is Grodno. There is a Lithuanian Grodno issue, of course, overprints on the Russian stamps.
Yes.
There is Polish Grodno issue with the Polish and German overprints on Grodno stamps. And so I don't know exactly what your area of interest is.
Okay. At first, historical, and then in second place, understanding what happened in philately, because if I remember well, Bermontavalov are in fact Latvian stamps overprinted. Then very little to do with Lithuania. Is it correct? Or they were overprinted with the symbol, which is a double cross, but it is not the Lithuanian double cross. It must be the Latvian or perhaps the French double cross. As you can see, my information in the subject is very chaotic and very limited.
Right. So there are 3 issues. All 3 of them have double crosses in them. The first one is just a circle with a double cross in it. Another one is a circle with wavy lines and a double cross in it. And the third one is a square overprint, also with double cross in it. So there are 3 separate issues. Some of them are more scarce than others. So, some of the stamps, like 10, I believe it was Kopijaks, although it was Latvian stamp, is probably the most scarce of the whole issue. But
okay. If you have any links or any article you could send me, that would be great. Just
Sure.
for that.
Sure, I'll send you
Thank you.
article. There was an article in English that I know of that was written a few years ago by Mandrovsky, a Russian guy who he recently passed away. He lived in the United States. But I'll send you. Give me your email, I guess. In the chat you can put your email address, and I will send you an email.
I will do that now.
With that article. I'll just attach a PDF.
Stefano, I can also add just a little bit. If you go to LithuanianPhilately.com and if you search for Bermont, you will see that in the series of articles describing early formation of the post offices and the provisional issues, there are at least 5 occasions mentioned the army in the northern part of Lithuania. And so there are like towns like Joniškis, Pakruojis, Kaltinėnai, Mažeikiai, Žagarė. So in the city of Mažeikiai, there is even an example of the cover and the kind of brief mentioning with the interaction from the little bit of the historical perspective. So there's some kind of touch of that with the Lithuanian philately as well. Maybe it's not as much as Latvians have, but at least that's kind of good starting point to find few references.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Any other talks? Any other discussions? Kas nori pasisakyt, papasakot ką nors, palinkėt geros dienos ar dar ką nors, prašau, puikiai galimybė. And I guess if not, I will stop recording, official recording of this, and I will try to upload to YouTube as I did with the previous one. It may take a day or 2. It's an hour and a half.